Right now, inside your skull, there are approximately 86 billion neurons firing in patterns that were largely shaped before you turned 25. Patterns that determine how you respond to failure, how you talk to yourself under pressure, whether you reach for comfort or challenge when things get hard, whether you follow through or find a reason to stop. These patterns feel like personality. They feel like who you are. But they are not who you are. They are who you have been trained to be. And the most important discovery in modern neuroscience, the one that changes everything if you truly understand it, is that those patterns are not permanent. Your brain is not a fixed machine running a program it downloaded in childhood. It is a living, adaptive, constantly rewriting system. And once you understand how to work with that system instead of against it, you stop trying to motivate yourself and you start actually changing. Today we are going to break down the neuroscience of how your brain forms its patterns, why most people trying to change fail, and exactly how to reprogram your mind for success at the biological level. The concept at the center of all of this is called neuroplasticity. And while most people have heard the word, very few understand what it actually means in practical terms. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. Every thought you think, every habit you repeat, every emotional response you have, travels along neural pathways in your brain. Think of these pathways like trails through a forest. The more a trail is walked, the wider and clearer it becomes. The less it is walked, the more it overgrows and disappears. Neuroscientists have a phrase for this process: neurons that fire together wire together. When you repeat a thought, a behavior, or a response pattern consistently, the neural pathway associated with that pattern gets stronger, faster, and more automatic. This is how habits form. This is how beliefs calcify. And this is also critically how they change. Because the same mechanism that hardwired your current patterns can be used to wire entirely new ones. But here is where most people's understanding of this stops too soon. They hear neuroplasticity and they think, great, I just need to think more positively and my brain will change. That is not how it works. Positive thinking alone does not rewire the brain. Repetition combined with emotional intensity combined with consistent action rewires the brain. Neuroscientist Dr. Joe Dispenza and researchers at institutions including MIT and Stanford have documented what actually drives meaningful neural change. It requires three elements working together. The first is attention. The brain changes along the lines of where you consistently direct focus. Whatever you pay attention to repeatedly, your brain builds infrastructure around. The second is emotion. Emotional experiences trigger the release of norepinephrine and dopamine, which act as neurological signals that essentially tell the brain, this matters, remember this. Build pathways here. Neutral information barely registers. Emotionally charged experience carves deep grooves. The third element is repetition over time. Single experiences, no matter how powerful, rarely create lasting neural change. It is the consistent return to new thoughts and new behaviors that consolidates new wiring. Miss any one of these three elements and the reprogramming stalls. Now let us talk about the system your brain uses to decide what to automate and what to keep requiring conscious effort. Deep inside your brain is a region called the basal ganglia. This structure is responsible for habit formation and procedural memory. When you first learn a new behavior, your prefrontal cortex, the thinking, decision-making part of your brain, is heavily involved. It takes effort, it takes concentration, it feels hard. But as you repeat the behavior, the basal ganglia gradually takes over processing. The behavior becomes chunked into an automatic routine that runs with minimal conscious input. This is why an experienced driver can navigate a familiar route while holding a conversation. The driving has been transferred to the basal ganglia. It runs on autopilot. This transfer is efficiency. Your brain is conserving energy for new problems. But it also means that if the behaviors that got automated early in your life were not serving you, they will keep running automatically until you deliberately intervene. The brain does not audit its own habits for usefulness. It just runs them. Reprogramming means going back in and doing that audit manually. The brain's reward system is the most powerful lever you have access to in this process. At the core of this system is a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Most people think dopamine is the pleasure chemical. That is not quite accurate. Dopamine is more precisely the anticipation and motivation chemical. It is released not just when you receive a reward, but when your brain predicts that a reward is coming. This is why scrolling social media is so hard to stop. Each scroll carries the possibility of something interesting or validating. That possibility, that unpredictable potential reward, triggers dopamine release. Your brain learns to crave the behavior because the behavior is associated with the anticipation of reward. Successful people have, deliberately or intuitively, learned to attach genuine dopamine reward to behaviors that serve their long-term goals. They have made progress feel rewarding. They have made discipline feel satisfying. This is not accidental. It is a trained response. And you can train it too, by understanding how to stack your environment, your tracking, and your self-talk to make the right behaviors feel rewarding to your brain instead of punishing. This brings us to one of the most practical concepts in behavioral neuroscience. It is called implementation intention, and it was developed through research by psychologist Peter Gallwitzer at New York University. Studies show that people who plan not just what they will do, but specifically when, where, and how they will do it, are dramatically more likely to follow through than people who rely on general intention and willpower alone. The reason is neurological. When you create a specific if-then plan, meaning if this situation occurs, then I will do this specific thing, you are essentially preloading a behavioral response into memory. When the trigger situation arrives, the behavior fires more automatically because the brain has already rehearsed the connection. You are using the brain's pattern recognition system to work for you, rather than waiting for motivation to show up and hoping it is enough. Willpower is unreliable because it is a limited resource that depletes throughout the day. Pre-programmed behavioral responses do not deplete. They activate. Here is a concept that the most successful people in the world apply without always knowing the neuroscience behind it. It is called identity-based change, and it was drawn into mainstream awareness by researcher James Clear. Most people try to change their behavior from the outside in. They set goals. They track outcomes. They try to force results. The research shows that this approach has a fundamental structural problem. It focuses on what you want to achieve rather than who you are becoming. And the brain, which is fundamentally a prediction machine, runs its behavioral programs based on identity, based on the story it believes about who you are. If you believe at the core level that you are someone who lacks discipline, your brain will find ways to confirm that belief because the brain is wired to seek consistency between identity and behavior. But when you shift the identity, when you begin to see yourself as someone who shows up, someone who does the work, someone who handles discomfort, the brain begins generating behaviors that are consistent with that identity. The goal is not just to run every day. The goal is to become a person who runs. The goal is not just to read more. The goal is to become someone who values learning. Identity is the operating system. Everything else runs on top of it. Now let us talk about the environment because neuroscience makes it undeniably clear that your brain does not operate in isolation from its surroundings. Stanford psychologist B.J. Fogg spent decades researching behavior change and arrived at a conclusion that challenges almost everything the self-help industry tells you. Willpower and motivation are wildly overrated. Environment design is wildly underrated. Your brain is constantly being prompted by environmental cues. The objects you see, the spaces you occupy, the people you are around, all of them trigger neural associations and behavioral patterns. If your environment is designed to make unhelpful behaviors easy and helpful behaviors hard, you will lose that battle most of the time regardless of how motivated you are. If your environment is designed the other way around, you will win it most of the time without needing extraordinary willpower. Put the book on the pillow. Put the running shoes by the door. Remove the apps that drain your focus from the first screen of your phone. Make the right behavior the path of least resistance, and your brain will follow that path because the brain is fundamentally lazy in the most efficient sense of the word. It does what is easiest. Design easy to mean what serves you. The last piece of this is the one most people skip entirely, and it is perhaps the most neurologically significant. It is the practice of mental rehearsal. Neuroscience has confirmed through brain imaging studies that the brain activates nearly identical neural pathways whether you are physically performing an action or vividly imagining performing it. Olympic athletes have used this for decades. Surgeons use it before complex procedures. When you repeatedly and vividly visualize yourself executing the behaviors of the person you want to become, you are not just motivating yourself. You are literally beginning to build the neural architecture of that version of you. You are pre-walking the trail before you physically walk it. And when the moment comes to act, the pathway is already partially formed. Your brain built its current patterns without your permission. It absorbed the environment it was placed in, repeated what was modeled to it, and automated whatever it encountered most often. You did not choose your starting code, but you are choosing right now whether to keep running it. Neuroplasticity means the code is always editable. Attention, emotion, repetition. Environment, identity, rehearsal. These are not metaphors for change. They are the actual biological mechanisms of it. Use them. The version of you that operates at a completely different level is not a fantasy. It is a neural pathway that does not exist yet. Go build it. If this gave you a new way to see your own mind, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because understanding your brain is the most powerful investment you will ever make.